Good evening. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Sunday, Yom Rishon. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house on a Sunday evening? Yehud in South Carolina, Sharon in New Jersey, Stephen in New Hampshire, Guy in Ohio, Melissa in Great Neck, Bill in Mid-Missouri, home at last, Paul in the Great Northwest, Bella in Florida, Lucy in Minnesota, John in Maine, Joe in the Inland Empire, Chaim in Florida, Marjorie in Georgia, Ella says shalom. Welcome, everybody. Our daf tonight is page 108 here in Tractate Bava, Kamma, the 21st volume of the Talmud. Continuing our discussion of Mishna number 5 here in chapter 9, and God willing, we'll complete it tonight and open Mishna number 6. We picked this up at the bottom of page 107b, and we're continuing our discussion of one who swears falsely we started by talking about the robber who swears he didn't rob. But now we've moved into one who receives a deposit, whether there's a paid bailee or an unpaid bailee, could also be a borrower or a renter, or one who finds a lost object, but he has an obligation to return this property that doesn't belong to him, and then he falsely swears that it was lost or stolen, and then either witnesses come and prove that he swore falsely, or he regrets having sworn falsely and admits what he did, and then what happens, right? So let's continue. So the Baraisa that was quoted earlier on page 65b taught that a bailee, right, a custodian, who would be liable for the double payment if witnesses were to testify that he had in fact stolen a deposit about which he had taken an oath attesting to its theft, that he does not pay the additional one-fifth payment normally imposed upon one who takes a false oath with regard to a monetary claim. Right? Now, normally what we've seen is if you admit that you swore falsely, before you're forced to, right, before witnesses come, then you're able to make an atonement. And part of that atonement is that you make restitution of what you took. You add 1/5 to that as the penalty. You're liable to bring a guilt offering if and when the temple is standing in Jerusalem. And if it was a robber who swore falsely that he robbed and now wants to make atonement, he also has to make that restitution personally, has to go very far distance to restore what he took or hand it over to an agent of the court. Now here what they're saying is, well, if the witnesses came, right, he said that the thing was stolen from him, and then witnesses say, no, he stole it, so he becomes liable to make the double payment because he didn't admit it of his own accord. And so he's liable to make the double payment. But what about the fact that he swore falsely? Aren't we going to add also the 1/5 penalty? And it seems the answer is no, because he's liable for the double payment. He's not also going to be liable for the 1/5. Moreover, he didn't admit it. But let's see how the discussion goes. So it says that he does not pay the additional 1/5. And the Gemara explores the reason for this law. So Rami Bar Chama raises a dilemma. Is it the monetary obligation that renders him liable for double payment? And is it that the fact that he's liable to make the double payment, a monetary obligation to make a double payment, which in fact is what also exempts him from the additional 1/5 payment? Or perhaps is it the taking of the oath that renders him liable for double payment, which is what is the device, right, that mechanically, as it were, exempts him from the additional 1/5 payment, right? Is it because he swore falsely that something was stolen from him, that a thief took from him, that makes him liable to the double payment and not for the 1/5? Or is it because he has to pay a double payment that he is exempt from the 1/5 payment? And the Gemara explains, what are the circumstances in which there is a practical difference between these two explanations? Well, it is in a case where he falsely states the claim that a thief stole the deposit, and he takes an oath to that effect, and then he retracts and falsely states the claim that it was lost, and he takes an oath to that effect. He's going to swear falsely twice. The first time that it was stolen from him, the second time that he lost it. Now we're on page 108a. And then witnesses come and testify with regard to his first claim, where he said it was stolen from him, that at the time he took an oath that the deposit had been stolen, it was actually in his possession. That's what the witnesses, come and testify, and so we show that it is true, that he had it in his possession when he swore that it had been stolen from him. And then he admits with regard to his second claim that it had been a lie and that it had not actually been lost. So then what is the law? Is he obligated to pay the additional 1/5 payment? He was forced to admit that his first oath was a lie when he said it was stolen from him. But his second oath, when he said it was lost, he, of his own volition, admitted that that had been a lie. So do we trigger in this set of circumstances the 1/5 payment as well? So the Gemara explains the two possibilities. Is it being obligated in a monetary obligation that renders him liable for the double payment, which exempts him from the additional 1/5 payment? And in this case, he is liable for the double payment for the deposit due to the witness testimony that when he said it was stolen with his first lying oath, that was a lie, and the witnesses proved that. Or perhaps is it admitting to a false oath that renders him liable for double payment, which exempts him from the additional 1/5 payment? And with regard to this latter oath that the item was lost, since it does not render him liable for the double payment, as he took an oath that it had been lost rather than stolen, falsely swearing that it was stolen, and then that comes out that it wasn't, that triggers a double payment. But falsely swearing that it was lost, that doesn't trigger the double payment of a thief. And so since his second oath was that it was lost, maybe now will it render him liable for the additional 1/5 payment or not? So Rava said, come in here a solution to this dilemma from a Mishna, Tractate Shavuos, page 49b. In a scenario where one said to someone from the marketplace, "Where is my ox that you stole?" And the accused one says in response, "I did not steal it." Whereupon the owner of the ox said, "I administer an oath to you." And the accused said, "Amen," meaning he accepted the oath. That meaning he swore that he had not stolen the ox. And then witnesses testify about the accused one that indeed he did steal it. So in that situation, he pays the double payment of a thief who got caught. And if he admitted of his own accord that he stole it, then he must pay the principal and the additional 1/5 payment and bring a guilt offering, but he doesn't pay the double payment, right? Because he admitted it himself. One who swears a false oath and admits it is on track to make an atonement, and his atonement requires the 1/5 penalty, monetary restitution, bringing a guilt offering. One who got caught thieving, that triggers a double payment. He's not on track to make atonement because he didn't admit it. Rava, right? That's what Rava said. So Rava explains the proof. But here, in the case that we've been discussing, it is witnesses who render him liable for the double payment, as since the accused was not a bailee, the oath does not render him liable. And yet the Mishnah teaches that if he admitted of his own accord that he stole it, then yes, he must pay the additional 1/5. But if he admitted it after witnesses testified, then no, he is not required to pay the additional fifth. And if it enters your mind to say that it is an oath that renders him liable for the double payment and which exempts him from the additional 1/5 payment, why does he not pay the additional 1/5 if he admitted that it was a false oath after witnesses testified? After all, this oath does not render him liable to pay the double payment, as the law that one who falsely takes an oath that an item was stolen pays the double payment, but this applies only in the case of a bailee, and therefore the oath should render him liable to pay the additional 1/5, as does any false oath taken with regard to a monetary claim. And now Rava completes his proof. So rather, must one not conclude from this Mishnah that it is the monetary obligation that renders him liable to pay the double payment and which exempts him from the additional 1/5? And the Gemara affirms, yes, conclude from the Mishnah that it is the additional 1/5 payment which is dependent upon the type of monetary obligation and not on the fact that he swore an oath, which resolves Rami Bar Chama's dilemma, right? So it is not an oath, right? So if you're liable to pay the double payment, then you're not going to be even given the opportunity. Don't think of it as then you're not liable to pay the fifth. It means that you don't get the opportunity to make the 1/5 payment, which is part of an atonement process, right? You got caught. You'll have to find other ways to atone. But 1/5 payment is the 1/5 penalty is not available to you. Now, new subject. Concerning the additional 1/5, Ravina raises a dilemma. If the additional 1/5 and the double payment are split among two men, then what is the law? Right? Presumably there was a partnership of thieves. Then what is the law? And the Gemara explains the dilemma. What are the circumstances? This is referring to a case where one transferred his ox to two people to safeguard. Okay, so they're going to be bailees. We haven't established if they're paid bailees or unpaid bailees, but they're partners who are who have undertaken, who have agreed to safeguard somebody's ox. So one transferred his ox to two people to safeguard, and then they stated the claim that a thief stole it from them, and one of them took an oath that it had been stolen, and subsequently admitted of his own accord that he had lied. And the other one took an oath that it had been stolen, and subsequently witnesses came and testified that he had lied. So what is the law in this case? Okay, so two are charged with guarding the ox. They agree to guard the ox. They both lie that it was stolen from them. One of them admits that he lied before it was proven against him, and the other one doesn't admit that he lied, and then witnesses came and proved that it was a lie. So normally if this was just a single guy, so he admits that he lied, that it was stolen from him without someone coming and proving it, he can make an atonement. Restore the money, add the fifth, bring a guilt offering, he's made atonement. The other one swore a false oath, witnesses came and proved it, he's liable to make the double payment, which is imposed by the court. He doesn't make the 1/5, he doesn't get to make the atonement. But now that they were in partnership and one admitted freely and the other one got caught after both stole and made a false oath, then what? So Ravina clarifies the possibilities. Do we say that the merciful one is particular with regard to one man, that he does not pay both the additional 1/5 payment and the double payment, whereas in this case, this one about whom the witnesses testified will pay the double payment, and that one who admitted it of his own accord will pay the additional 1/5? Or perhaps the merciful one is particular that the additional 1/5 payment and the double payment will not be paid for one monetary obligation, and here too, it is one monetary obligation. So can we split up the result so that one guy pays the double payment and the other guy pays the fifth? Or do they have to have the same outcome since it was the same underlying ox that both are tied to? What's the answer? Taiku. This dilemma was left unresolved. New subject. concerning the additional 1/5. Rav Papa raises a dilemma. In a case of 2 additional 1/5 payments or 2 double payments with regard to 1 man, then what is the law? Must he pay twice for the same monetary obligation? We already encountered this. What if he swears a false oath twice? Then it certainly can trigger that he has to make the 5th twice. But let's see what the circumstances are in this particular dilemma. Now, the Gemara explains, what are the circumstances? This is referring to a case where one stated the claim that the deposit was lost, and then he took an oath, and then he admitted that it was not lost. And then he returned and again stated the claim that the same deposit was lost. And then he took another oath supporting this claim, and again he admitted that it was not lost. Alternatively, this is referring to a case where one stated the claim that a thief stole the deposit and took an oath, and then witnesses came and testified that he had taken it himself. And he returned and again stated the claim that a thief stole the same deposit and again took an oath. And then witnesses came and again testified that he had taken it. So then what is the law? Now, this sounds sort of ridiculous. Once this guy's already been established as a liar who took an oath and then witnesses came and proved it, when would he have this opportunity? Who would listen to him when he again swears that he didn't take it? It was already established that he did. Answer, different jurisdiction, right? So this might have happened that he swore an oath and then he left town. And then witnesses showed that this guy was a liar, but by then he's gone. And then the plaintiff, right, the robbery victim, can chase him down in another jurisdiction, and there again he swears that he didn't do it, and again you bring the witnesses. So now you have him taking 2 false oaths before different courts. So are we going to charge him twice? Let's see. So Rav Papa clarifies the possibilities. Do we say that the merciful one states concerning 2 types of monetary restitution, for example, the double payment and the additional 1/5, that they will not be paid for one underlying monetary obligation, but here it is only one type, merely doubled? Or perhaps the merciful one states concerning 2 payments of monetary restitution that they will not be paid for one underlying monetary obligation, and here too they are 2 payments of monetary restitution, whether in the case of 2 additional fifths or 2 double payments. And so the Gemara suggests a resolution to Rav Papa's dilemma. Coming here, as Rava says, the verse states, or anything about which he has sworn falsely, he shall restore it in full and shall add the 5th more there too. Leviticus 5:24. And by employing a plural term, chamishitav, and not the singular chamishito, the Torah added many additional 1/5ths for one principle, meaning that one can become obligated in multiple 1/5 payments for the same principle. And the Gemara affirms, conclude from Rava's statement that this is the law, right? So whether he swore falsely and admitted it twice, or he swore falsely and got caught twice, it can trigger multiple penalty payments. New subject. Now, the Gemara discusses a dispute among the Amoraim, right, the sages of the Talmud, concerning a similar case. So if an owner demanded of an unpaid bailee, right, one who was watching for example, the owner of an ox asks his friend to watch the ox for him as an unpaid bailee, right? So that the custodian, the bailee, is doing it as a favor. So if the owner demanded of an unpaid bailee that he return a deposit, and the bailee claimed that it had been stolen from him, and he took an oath to that effect. Now he's done. An unpaid bailee who swears that the item had been stolen from him, right? An unpaid bailee is not liable if the property is stolen from him. A paid bailee would be. He is being paid to make sure it doesn't get stolen. But an unpaid bailee is not liable if it was stolen from him. So this unpaid bailee swears that it was stolen from him. The case is over. He doesn't have to pay. He took that oath. But then something else happened. So the owner demanded of the unpaid bailee that he return a deposit, and he claimed that it had been stolen from him, and he took an oath to that effect. And despite being exempt from payment, he paid of his own volition. He didn't need to pay, but he paid. For whatever reason, he felt responsible. He thought that, maybe he left the barn door open, and then a thief came in and took it. And so he felt responsible to his friend. So even though it was stolen from him, and he swore to that effect, and he didn't have to pay, he pays. Okay. And subsequently, the thief was identified, meaning the thief was found, he was caught. And the thief now becomes liable to make the double payment that a thief makes. And the question is, to whom does the double payment go? Does it go to the owner of the animal, whose animal was stolen? Or does it go to his friend who was the unpaid bailee, from whom it was stolen, and who didn't have to make restitution to the owner of the animal, and yet the friend, the unpaid bailee, made that restitution? So he's the one who's out the value of an animal. The owner got the value of the animal. So doesn't it make sense that now that the thief has to make a double payment, he pays it to the bailee? Because he's the one who didn't have to, but he did pay. And Abaye says to the owner of the ox that was stolen, and Rava says to the one in whose possession the deposit was when it was stolen, meaning the bailee. And the law is like Rava. It's the bailee who made restitution even though he didn't have to. So now he steps into the place of the owner. And if the thief is caught, he makes the double payment to the bailee. Now the Gemara explains their opinions. Abaye says that the double payment is paid to the owner of the deposit, since excuse me. Abaye says the double payment is paid to the owner of the deposit, right? The original owner of the animal, since the bailee troubled him by taking an oath instead of paying immediately. So the owner is not willing to grant acquisition of the double payment to the bailee, so it is paid to the owner. Rava says that the double payment is paid to the one in whose possession the deposit was when it was stolen. Once he paid, the owner grants acquisition of the double payment to the bailee. I mean, this feels right? We like Rava's solution because when the owner of the barn, right, who was watching the ox but left the door open, so he feels bad, he's not obligated to pay his friend, the owner of the ox, but he does. So at that point, it's clear that, okay, we don't know if the thief is going to be found. Probably he's not going to be found. So the owner of the barn, right, who makes good to his friend who stored the ox there, he says, look, take the money. I'm sorry that I left the door open and it was stolen. If the thief ever is found, then he can pay me, but probably he won't be, right? So he's undertaking that risk. Now the Gemara explains, and Abaye and Rava disagree with regard to the deductive inference to be drawn from the wording of the Mishna. As we learned in a Mishna in Tractate Bava Mitzia, page 33b, in the case of one who deposits with another, i.e. an unpaid bailee, an animal or vessels, and they were stolen or lost, and the bailee paid the owner and did not wish to take an oath, which he may decide to do, as the sages said that an unpaid bailee takes an oath that he is exempt and he is released from the obligation to pay the owner, but he may also opt to pay. In such a case, the law is that if the thief was found, he pays the double payment, or if the deposited item was a sheep or an ox and the thief slaughtered or sold it, he pays the fourfold or fivefold payment. And to whom does the thief pay those payments? He pays them to the one in whose possession the deposit was when it was stolen or lost. So when the bailee paid the owner for the stolen item, he acquired it, and therefore is entitled to any payment of principal or fine paid by the thief. And the Mishnah continues that the bailee took an oath and did not wish to pay, and the thief was later found and was required to pay the double payment, or he slaughtered or sold the sheep or the ox and was required to pay the fourfold or fivefold payment, then to whom does he pay the money? He pays it to the owner of the deposit and not to the bailee. This is a good common sense outcome. Now the Gemara explains the dispute. Abaye inferred the law from the wording of the first clause, and Rava inferred the law from the wording of the latter clause. Abaye inferred it from the wording of the first clause, as it teaches, if the bailee paid the owner and did not wish to take an oath. Right, so here what we had, that's why our case is complicated, not like that Mishna in Bava Mitzia. In Bava Mitzia, it's the unpaid bailee chooses. Does he want to take the oath and then he doesn't pay? Or maybe he doesn't want to take an oath because he's afraid that he might be wrong, so he pays. But our guy both took the oath and paid. That's why there's a dilemma between Abaye and Rava. Right, so Abaye inferred it from the wording of the first clause, as it teaches, if the bailee paid the owner and did not wish to take an oath, the thief pays the double, fourfold or fivefold payment to the bailee. So Abaye infers from here that the reason the thief pays the bailee is specifically that he did not wish to take an oath. But if he took an oath, even though he subsequently paid, to whom does the thief pay the double payment? To the owner of the deposit. Now we're on 108b. And Rava inferred the law from the wording of the latter clause in that Mishna tractate Bava Mitzia. It teaches that the bailee took an oath and did not want to pay, the thief must pay the penalty to the owner of the deposit. So Rava infers from here that the reason the thief pays the owner specifically is that he did not wish to pay. But if the bailee did pay, then even though he took an oath previously, to whom does the thief pay his fine? To the one in whose possession the deposit was when it was lost, i.e. the bailee. So the Gemara notes that the inference from the latter clause is difficult for the opinion of Abaye. And the Gemara explains Abaye could have said to you, this is what the latter clause of the Mishnah is teaching. If the bailee took an oath and did not want to pay initially before taking the oath, but rather wanted to pay only after having taken the oath, in this case, to whom does the thief pay the double payment? To the owner of the deposit. And similarly, the Gemara notes the inference from the first clause is difficult for the opinion of Rava. And the Gemara explains Rava could have said to you, this is what the first clause of the Mishnah is teaching. If he paid, meaning he had taken an oath and did not want to stand by his oath, but instead paid in order to nullify the oath he had taken. Then to whom does the thief pay the double payment? To the one in whose possession the deposit was when it was lost. New dilemma regarding the status of a bailee and stolen deposits. If the owner of a deposit demanded from a bailee that he return the deposit, and he claimed that it had been stolen from him, and he took an oath to that effect, and then the thief was recognized, and the bailee demanded of the thief to pay, and he admitted to having stolen it, and then the owner demanded of the thief to pay, and he denied the claim, and the owner brought witnesses that he had stolen it. So did the thief become exempt from double payment when he admitted that he stole it to the bailee? Right, a thief who admits it before witnesses are brought doesn't make the double payment. A thief who gets caught and the two witnesses establish the fact that he stole, he's the one who makes the double payment. So in this case, the thief stole from the bailee. He admitted to the bailee that he stole, but he denied that he stole to the owner, and then the owner established the theft with these witnesses. So vis-a-vis the bailee, there's no double payment. Vis-a-vis the owner, there is double payment. But he stole it and it was in the possession of the bailee. So do we trigger the double payment or not? It's a good dilemma. So did the thief become exempt from double payment through his admission to the bailee, as is the law when one admits liability to a penalty? Does the bailee have standing vis-a-vis the thief despite having exempted himself by taking an oath to the owner? Or did the thief not become exempt through his admission to the bailee? Rava says, if he took an oath truthfully, i.e. if it now becomes clear through the testimony of witnesses that the bailee's oath was true, then he is assumed to be someone that the owner would rely on to collect the stolen item for him, and he remains a bailee. Therefore, the thief became exempt through his admission to the bailee. If the bailee's oath was taken falsely, for example, he took an oath that the animal given as a deposit died naturally, and it is now clear that his oath was false because it was stolen, then he is assumed to be someone whom the owner would not rely on to collect the stolen item for him, and he is no longer a bailee. So in this case, the thief did not become exempt through his admission to the bailee, and when he, denied it to the owner, and the owner brought witnesses, and he got caught, so the thief owes the double payment, and who does he owe it to? To the owner. Now, Rava raises a dilemma concerning this previous ruling. If a bailee rose to take a false oath, but the owner did not let him, then what is the law? Should he be considered as one who had taken a false oath? Should he be considered as one who had taken a false oath, as that was his intention, and he is no longer a bailee? Or, since he never actually took the false oath, he is still a bailee? And the Gemara comments, the question shall stand unresolved. Teku. The Gemara notes that Rav Kahana would teach Rava's question like this, as quoted above, and Rav Tavyume would teach Rava's question differently. Rava raises a dilemma. If he actually took a false oath, then what is the law? Is he still a bailee or not? And the Gemara comments, the question shall stand unresolved. You see why it matters if he's the bailee or not. And you would say that somebody who lies and was shown to be a liar, that's not somebody you'd want as your bailee. And so it matters in this situation because when the thief comes, he admits something to the bailee. So it's like saying, is the bailee the agent of the owner for the purpose of receiving or administering this oath, which, it was false and then proven false, which would obligate the thief or the, a subsequent bailee to make a double payment. But the bailee himself was dishonest, so how can he receive that oath? You see how the question would work. Now, the Gemara relates a different dilemma concerning the status of a bailee in stolen deposits. If the owner of a deposit demanded from a bailee that he return the deposit, and he paid instead of taking an oath, and then the thief was recognized, and the owners demanded of the thief to pay, and he admitted to having stolen it, and then the bailee demanded of the thief to pay, and he denied the claim, and the bailee brought witnesses that he had stolen it. So did the thief become exempt from the double payment when he admitted it to the owners, as is the law when one admits liability to a penalty, or not? Because now, who is actually the owner of the property? The bailee was watching it. It was stolen from him. He made restitution to the owner. And now he wants the thief who got caught to pay him, the bailee, the double payment, even though the bailee already admitted that he stole to the owner. But it's like the owner's not the owner anymore. So the Gemara explains, do we say that the bailee can say to the owners, once you took your money from me, you removed yourselves from here. You have no further connection to this deposit. I paid you off. Therefore, I am now considered the owner of the stolen item, and the right to the double payment is mine. And the thief's admission to you is meaningless. Or perhaps the owners can say to him, to the bailee, just as you performed a service for us by paying us when you were not obligated, we performed a service for you as well. Instead of granting acquisition of the double payment to you to enable you to be repaid, we took the trouble to search after the thief. So we will take what is ours, i.e. the stolen item, and you take what is yours, the money that you paid us. So which is the outcome? Teku, this matter was left unresolved. Now, it was stated, new subject, if an animal that was given as a deposit was stolen in circumstances beyond the control of the bailee. If you have a paid bailee, he is liable if the animal is stolen from him by a thief. He's supposed to watch the animal so a thief can't sneak in and take the animal. But if the animal was being watched even by a paid bailee, and armed bandits came and stole it from the bailee, This is outside the scope of his obligation to safeguard the animal. So this is considered circumstances beyond his control, so that even a paid bailee would not be liable to make restitution if armed bandits came and took the animal from him. So, if an animal given as a deposit was stolen in circumstances beyond the control of the bailee, and he is therefore exempt from liability regardless of whether he was paid or not, and then the thief was recognized, or let's say the armed bandit was recognized, Abaye says if he is an unpaid bailee, then if he so desires, he can choose to enter into judgment with the thief, i.e. the bailee will pay the owner and then get reimbursed by the thief. And if he so desires, he can take an oath that he was not responsible and the owner can demand his money from the thief. If he is a paid bailee, he enters into judgment with the thief and he does not have the option to take an oath to become exempt, as the responsibility to collect payment from the thief is part of his duty as the paid bailee. So Rava says whether this unpaid bailee or that paid bailee enters into judgment with the thief, he does not have the option to take an oath. And the Gemara suggests, shall we say that Rava disagrees with the ruling of Rav Huna bar Avin? As Rav Huna bar Avin sent this ruling: if an animal given as a deposit was stolen in circumstances beyond the control of the bailee, and the thief was recognized, if he is an unpaid bailee, then if he so desires, he can choose to enter into judgment with the thief. And if he so desires, he can take an oath that he was not responsible, and the owner can demand his money from the thief. And if it was a paid bailee, then he enters into judgment with the thief and does not have the option to take an oath. And the Gemara responds, Rava could have said to you, with what are we dealing here? We are dealing with a case where it happened that first the bailee took an oath before the thief was recognized. And the Gemara questions this explanation. But Rav Huna bar Avin says, if he so desires, he can choose to enter into judgment with the thief. And if he so desires, he can take an oath that he was not responsible, indicating that the bailee has not yet taken an oath. And the Gemara answers, rather, this is what Rav Huna bar Avin is saying, having first taken an oath that the thief was recognized. Having first taken an oath before the thief was recognized, if an unpaid bailee so desires, he can remain with his oath and not pay the owner. And if he so desires, he can choose to enter into judgment with the thief. So Rabba Zuti raises the dilemma like this: if an animal given as a deposit was stolen in circumstances beyond the control of the bailee, and the thief returned the animal to the place from where he had stolen it, and it is now in the house of the bailee, and it then died through the bailee's negligence, then what is the law? Do we say that once it was stolen in circumstances beyond the bailee's control, his guardianship is completed, and he has no more responsibility for the animal, even for subsequent negligence? Or perhaps once it was returned, it returned to his guardianship, and an unpaid bailee is liable for loss resulting from negligence. And the Gemara comments, Teku, this question shall stand unresolved. And with that, we complete our discussion of Mishnah number 5 here in chapter 9. We're actually almost done. We're going to read Mishnah number 6. That'll bring us to the next daf, page 109, and we're going to knock off. So if you have questions or comments, get them in now. Mishnah 6. If the owner asked the bailee, where is my deposit? And the bailee said to him, it was lost. And the owner said, I administer an oath to you. And the bailee said, Amen, right? Meaning he's swearing that it was lost. So therefore accepting the oath, and then witnesses testify about the bailee that it was not lost, but rather that he consumed it. Well, then he must pay the principal. If the bailee admitted on his own that he had taken a false oath, then he must pay the principal and the additional 1/5 and bring a guilt offering. Right? So he said it was lost. Witnesses came and established that he was a liar. So he just has to pay the money for what was deposited with him. If he admits it before the witnesses come, then he has to return what the value of the deposit, add 1/5, and bring a guilt offering. Sounds like the consequences are worse if he admits it than if he gets caught lying. and we've encountered this principle before. And here's how it's explained by Rav Steinsaltz. The reason one does not give the additional 1/5 payment and bring a guilt offering when he did not admit his guilt is because it is written, Numbers 5:7, and they will admit their transgression. And this is actually stated in the context of one who stole from a convert. Now, it is derived from there that one gives the additional 1/5 payment and brings a guilt offering only through his own admission and not when witnesses testified about him. And this is because the additional 1/5 payment and the guilt offering serve as atonement. And one cannot fully atone for his transgression unless he himself admits it. And that's why one who got caught doesn't have the opportunity to add the 5th and bring a guilt offering because he's still wallowing in his sin, as it were. He could regret it later, he could make repentance, he could make atonement, but he doesn't have this mechanism to use for his atonement. Okay, if the owner asked the bailee, and by the way, why was there no double payment involved? Because the bailee claimed it was lost. If the bailee had claimed it was stolen, and then that turned out to be established as a lie by the testimony of witnesses, that's when the double payment would kick in. But since the bailee lied and said it was lost, once proven that it's a lie, he has to make restitution, but he doesn't trigger the double payment. That's just a feature of the law. Now, if the owner asked the bailee, where is my deposit? And the bailee said to him, it was stolen. And the owner said, I administer an oath to you. And the bailee said, Amen, therefore accepting the oath. And then witnesses testify about the bailee that he stole it. He must pay the payment of double the principal, the double payment. If the bailee admitted on his own that he had taken a false oath, then he pays the principal, adds 1/5, and brings a guilt offering. In the case of one who robs his father, big sin, and the father demands that he return the stolen item, and he takes an oath to his father that he did not rob him, and then the father dies, and the son admits that he robbed his father and took a false oath, necessitating the return of the principal and the giving of the additional 5th. But who's he going to give it to? His father is dead, so he owes it to his father's heirs. He is his father's heir, but he has brothers, right? So he owes it to his brothers. Necessitating the return of the principal and the giving of the additional 1/5 payment to his father's heirs, of which he is either one of several or the only one. Then what should he do? So this son pays the principal and the additional 1/5 to his father's sons or brothers, and he brings a guilt offering, and he does not keep his own share. And if he does not want to forfeit his share, or where he does not have sufficient funds to pay the other heirs while forfeiting his share, so he borrows money in the amount of the value of the stolen item, and the creditors come, and they are repaid in part from his share in the stolen item. Now, in the case of one who says to his son in a vow, it is forbidden like an offering. This is called konam. If you consecrate something, right, it becomes the temple property, and now you can't use it for your own benefit. And you could also take a neder to say that this item, it is like hekdesh to me. It is like a consecrated item to me. So what he's saying is, I hereby am taking a vow not to receive benefit from that item, and that's called konam. So in the case of one who says to his son in a vow, it is forbidden like an offering, konam, and for that reason, you may not derive benefit from my property. If the father then dies and the son inherits from him, because it is no longer the father's property once he dies. I'm sorry. The father said it is like an offering to me, right? He says he will not receive benefit from his own property. And for that reason, you may not derive benefit from my property. No, I'm sorry. I guess the father said to his son that my property is like an offering to you, meaning my property, I am taking a vow that none of my property may be used by you, right? That's what he said about his property it's like he's disinheriting his son. But he didn't disinherit. He just said that my property is like an offering to you. If the father then dies, the son inherits. It's like the vow is canceled. Why? Because it is no longer the father's property once he died. So he says, my property is like konam, is like an offering. My property is konam to you. But once the father dies, it's not his property anymore. So the son does inherit despite that vow. Now, if the father stated in his vow that his son may not derive benefit from his property in his life and in his death, then, even if the father then dies, the son does not inherit from him, as the prohibition is still in effect. This is a father who disinherited his son. And instead of taking his inheritance, he returns his portion in the estate to his sons or to his brothers. And if he does not have sufficient funds to subsist without his inheritance, he borrows money in the amount of the value of his share of the inheritance, and the creditors come and are repaid from his share. Interesting. So it's like he can get it, but only if he's so poor that he can't subsist without it. That's what I've got for us today. Let's see if there's any questions or comments that Nina has passed over to me on Bava Kamma 108. Sharon, if a bailee takes an oath but insists on paying because he felt bad, is he in violation of not keeping an oath? No, right? Because, and that's the case that we had. And the reason is he didn't take the kind of oath that, I swear I will not, receive money, or I swear I will not accept property. What he said was, the property that you deposited with me, right? I didn't take it for myself. I wasn't negligent. If he's a paid bailee, it wasn't stolen from me, right? That's what he's swearing. And now normally that oath would absolve him from having to make restitution to the owner of the property. Now, as you're saying, he feels bad, that he probably should have done a better job, and so he pays. But that doesn't violate his oath, right? The oath was real. It was true. He's not regretting that he took a false oath. He's just saying, he's just paying because he wants his friend to be whole. And the consequences of this are that if the thief is then found, the thief, per the law, per the opinion of Rava, which is the law, the thief will owe the bailee and not the owner. Lucy, it seems that the halacha, the law, encourages a cynical bailee who would have an advantage by swearing falsely. Right, so you're saying that the law, if he's not a pious person, so he's just going to swear falsely and get off the hook, whereas a pious bailee wouldn't do that. Choose your bailee carefully. And Joseph, finally, what is the significance of whether it's a paid or unpaid bailee? That, a paid bailee has a higher level of responsibility to your property. Namely, I think there's other examples, but the main one is that if the ox is stolen by a thief from the property, from the possession of the paid bailee, he has to make restitution. If it's an unpaid bailee, he doesn't, right? He has a higher level of responsibility and accountability because he's being paid to watch the animal. It makes sense. That's what I've got for us today, and with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow night, Monday at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. Have a